A very warm welcome to all of you from the International Academy for Clinical Hematology. Today's webinar is dedicated to the memory of Dr. Brian Durie. Dr. Brian Durie is a towering figure in the field of multiple myeloma, whose work and humanity have profoundly shaped our community for half a century. Since the landmark publication of the famous Salmon and Durie staging system in 1975, Dr. Durie has been at the very heart of every major advance in myeloma. His scientific vision helped define how we understand the disease, evaluate its extent, and measure response, frameworks that remain in use around the globe. But beyond science, Dr. Durie embodied the spirit of compassionate medicine. Through his leadership of the International Myeloma Foundation and his tireless global advocacy, he transformed the way we engage with patients and families, empowering them as partners, educators, and drivers of progress. His legacy is not only written in papers and protocols, but is also in the lives of thousands of patients who found hope through his work and the countless physicians he mentored with wisdom and humility. As we gather today under the ICH banner, we celebrate Dr. Durie's enduring contributions to science, to advocacy, and to humanity, and we reaffirm our shared commitment to the values he championed: knowledge, compassion, and global collaboration. Here are some quotes from Dr. Durie. The ongoing care for myeloma is a marathon, not a sprint. And all throughout resilience will undoubtedly need to be enhanced. He also said, one must be open to the highly improbable in order to make significant advances. To find a cure, we must truly look for approaches that have a dramatic impact, not just move the ball a little bit forward. Early diagnosis provides the best opportunity for curative therapy. Collaboration, not competition, is key. And last but not least, we must bring health and caring back into healthcare and work together to achieve it. I'll stop here, and before broadcasting the latest lecture that was given by Dr. Durie in May 2024 as part of the COMI Congress, the Controversies in Multiple Myeloma, I would like to welcome Professor Jean-Luc Harousseau, who is another leading figure and pioneer in the field of multiple myeloma. And most importantly, he has been collaborating and in contact with Dr. Durie for more than 30 years. And Jean-Luc, bonsoir. Good
Good
evening.
evening, good
And
afternoon.
we would love to hear from you about Brian.
But first, I have to say that I learned his sudden death with great sadness, and it was really for me a great shock. I continue to see him every year, and the last time I saw him at the end of last year, he had new projects. He was always having new ideas. So you said that I met him for the first time more than 30 years ago, and it was during an educational session of the European School of Hematology in Italy. And I participate in this session because I just started the program of hydrotherapy, which was a new way of treating multiple myeloma in the late 80s. And he was already a great star because he was, as you said, the author of the Durian-Salmon staging system. And I was very impressed by showing this star because I was just starting my career in multiple myeloma. And I was impressed by, and this was confirmed during the following 30 years, I was impressed by many of these very special ways of functioning. First, he was very curious. He has an intellectual curiosity, and he wanted to learn every time. Second, he was very reactive, and hydrotherapy was a new strategy. And as you mentioned, he said that we need new approaches already in the 80s. And after that, I learned that he was a very hard worker. He had a complete knowledge of the field, from the basic science to clinical research. And what I can say that he has a special position in the field of the giants of multiple myeloma research, because he was, as you said, not only a researcher and a physician, but he wanted also to involve the patients, the caregivers, the healthcare professional, everybody who can be involved in the disease, but mostly the patient. And his particular contribution is really the foundation of the IMF, the International Myeloma Foundation, with Susie Novice and initially Brian Novice. And this foundation really was a great success. It is now 35 years old, and it has very rapidly increased, and now it concerns almost all countries all over the world, even in Africa. So really, it shows that Brian has a vision, he had an ambition, and he was really not only the founder, but the leader of the IMF, the scientific director, but also he wanted to control everything. And he was at the origin of all the great projects of IMF on research, guidelines for the doctors, education, even for the patients, and advocacy, as you said.
So
really,
Jean-Luc,
yeah.
While it seems very obvious and natural today to have patient involvement and advocacy, that wasn't the case 30 or 40 years ago. And this was very visionary. And I think you have contributed for many years with him, touring the world, meeting with patient association, patient groups, explaining the disease, explaining the innovation. Would love to hear this really new spirit that he injected in the field.
Absolutely. He started very early what he called patient seminars. And of course, he started in the United States. And the American patients are maybe better informed than patients all over the world. And even at that time, in the 90s, they were already very well informed, but they wanted to know more and they wanted to ask questions about their own disease. So I was happy to participate in some of these patient seminars, not only in the United States, but also in Europe. And he organized patient seminar in France. The first patient seminar in France was organized with the help of International Myeloma Foundation, and he came to Paris to participate in these first seminars. I also participated in seminars in many countries in Europe and even in East Asia. He went in many times to East Asia, especially China, to meet doctors and to create a network of Asian physicians and researchers, but he also met the patient. And I remember a fantastic patient seminar in Beijing where there were more than 400 patients participating. They didn't speak English, so we needed translation. That was very long, but they were very happy to hear Professor Dury and the other experts explaining their disease and explaining the treatment. Yes, really, he did a great, that was really an innovation, and he continued. He created what he called the GMAN, with the Global Myeloma Advocacy Network, helping the association all over the world, and especially in countries where drugs and are not always available. So he tried to help the association to obtain this new agent. So really a very special position in the myeloma world.
So patient advocacy, injecting this patient-centric approach, but also, and one of his quotes was about always collaboration, not competition. And this has led to the creation of the International Myeloma Working Group. And today we owe to the IMWG, which meets several times per year, many of the new classifications, response criteria, guidelines. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this idea also of.
Yeah, I think it was a great success, and one of his objective was, as you said, to make physicians work together. And I really think that it is important, not only at the national level, and we did that in France, creating the Intergroupe du Myélome, the EIFM, but also at the international level. And he succeeded in making physicians and researchers from many countries work together, not only in the United States and North America, not only in Europe, but in all parts of the world, including Asia, including South America, including Australia. All countries do participate to this International Myeloma Working Group. And this was really successful because pushing the doctors to work together to think about the current status, but also the future, was really the origin of many, many papers, classification, guidelines, which are always renovated, updated, but which remain for us a very important source of information. So yes, you're right, cooperation rather than competition.
And one of his also visionary ideas was about detecting and tackling the disease very early. And this is why he believed very quickly in this Icelandic project of iStop multiple myeloma, which was strongly supported by the IMF. And we know today that this has led to probably one of the most, the biggest project in the field of multiple myeloma, being able to follow gammopathies and monitor them in a population at the size of a nation. So what do you think of this vision and how this is going to prepare the future? Because we all believe, and we discussed this a few weeks ago at the IMS in Toronto, we all now believe that cure is around the corner for many patients.
First, I have to say that it was very reactive. He was very reactive. When he thought that an idea could lead to an improvement, immediately it started to work on it, to gather people who could be able to help him. And I give just an example. Minimal residual disease. When he learned the first paper from Spain and France about the prognostic impact of minimal residual disease, he immediately thought that it was a very important idea for the future, and especially for trying to reach cure. That's the reason why he was involved in helping the labs working on minimal residual disease, and launched the project of pushing the FDA to accept minimal residual disease as a criterion for clinical research and for defining the objective of clinical trials. But back to what you are saying about treating myeloma at the very beginning, this was part of what he called the Black Swan Project initiative. The objective was to cure multiple myeloma. And since I worked many times with him, I often heard him saying, our objective is curing myeloma and making patients without symptoms for years. So the Black Swan Initiative, Black Swan Research Initiative was an addition of different projects, including supporting clinical trials of curative intent at the very early stage of multiple myeloma, what we call high-risk smoldering myeloma. And he pushed trials in Spain and the United States. But also, as you said, he was really very supportive of the project by the Icelandic team on I-STOP myeloma, which is based on the testing of all the Icelandic population after the age of 50 to detect monoclonal gammopathy and to decide what is the best strategy. So this is a very ambitious program, and he immediately believed in this program and supported him. So yes, I think he said many times that the best way to cure myeloma would be to treat him early. Maybe he's right. We will see if he's right in the very near future. But of course, it is one of the possibility for curing myeloma, and we strongly believed in it.
Thank you very much, Professor Haruso, for sharing these memories and about the late Dr. Brian Durie. We are deeply saddened by the passing of Dr. Durie, but I think we are all convinced, and we heard this from Professor Haruso, that his vision and leadership have left an enduring legacy that will continue to inspire the myeloma community for years to come. And today at the ICH, we are honored to share this memorable lecture delivered by Dr. Durie during the World Congress on Controversies in Multiple Myeloma in May 2024. This meeting was held in Paris, and you will see from this 20-minute lecture that we will broadcast in a few seconds that his visionary insights and lifelong dedication have shaped the field and will continue to inspire physicians and patients worldwide. So I do invite you to watch now and revisit the wisdom of one of the true pioneers of our community. Thank you all for joining, and please enjoy the next broadcast.
Thanks to Professor Modi and the organizers for the chance to present at this meeting. Coming up here as a patient advocate, I think that we need to be paying full attention to what I think is a major unmet need globally, is that our patients around the world need to have access to standard of care diagnostics and standard of care therapies. And what I'm going to talk about is a template of teaming up between myeloma experts and patient advocates to achieve the approval for MRD with the ODAC and for the FDA. And this is very, very important. However, listening to you guys, I realize that what I've experienced meeting patients all around the world is that this unmet need to have access to diagnostics and treatments is really something that we need to focus on and put together a team, which I'll illustrate to you was very effective in achieving approval for MRD. So let me go ahead here. So the perspective that I'm going to give you is a combination of two perspectives. Number one, as Vincent mentioned, the International Myeloma Foundation has had the perspective to help and support patients around the world. But in addition, on this slide, you'll see the black swan at the bottom on the right, and that is a program that was developed over 10 years ago. And this came from a patient perspective, which was we asked patients, when patients are first diagnosed and they come into the office, well, what is the first thing that they ask? They say, well, this diagnosis, this word that I've never heard of, is this disease curable? They want to know, can I be cured? And the next question frequently to me was, am I working to cure myeloma? And the answer to that was actually no, in that most of us had not had that particular focus. And so we decided to have a brainstorming meeting in Amsterdam at the time of the EHA meeting and came up with this Black Swan Research Initiative. And the two parts to that were that, yes, we should have a program that was searching to try to cure myeloma. And number two, that the thing that was most essential to try to achieve that was the ability to monitor myeloma at a low level of disease with deep responses, which we are achieving with the better and better therapies, especially the immune therapies. And so the number one goal was actually to have available precise and sensitive MRD testing and to seek to have that achieved and approved at a regulatory level. So I have no conflicts to compare, so to declare. And so I'm going to tell you the end of the story first, and then the different steps that were necessary to achieve that I think that might be applicable for projects where we really prioritize the need. And so one thing that we did was to put together this team called the I-Squared team, the International Independent Team for Endpoint Approval for MRD and myeloma. And so we submitted information to the FDA seeking approval of MRD as an early endpoint for accelerated approval. And I'll get into some of the details of that in just a moment. And so the end of the story is that we were, in fact, successful, and there was an ODAC hearing that was held on April the 12th that you heard about earlier in the meeting, which was a joint ODAC-FDA meeting in which a vote was held to say that there was support for the use of MRD as an early endpoint for accelerated approval. And so this is it's an unusual meeting. On the right, the members of the ODAC committee sit there. If you look closely, we were fortunate that one of our colleagues was on this particular committee, Tom Martin. You maybe can see is sitting over on the right there. But most of these individuals are not informed about myeloma. These are other types of oncologists, hematologists, statisticians, and so they need to be convinced about the details of myeloma and also why MRD might be important. Over on the right, you have the members of the FDA who are listening to the presentations, which are made from a podium over beside the two flags which are in the corner, the back corner there. And so the data were presented to this august group to seek their approval, and they agreed that it was an excellent proposal, so much so that the FDA presented after we had presented, and they basically agreed with all of our statistics and said that the stats were so strong that basically it was fine. that they didn't have any agreement, and the very crazy thing for us was that the discussion occurred mostly between the ODAC committee members and the FDA, because the concern was if MRD is to be used, how is it to be used? And in what trials, and what would be the details of the timing and the patient populations and things like that. And so it's important for us to be aware of how the MRD approval will be implemented moving forward. In follow-up discussions with the FDA, there will be no specific formal statement coming from the FDA. So what is happening is a couple of things in the short term. First of all, the discussions between the ODAC committee and the FDA are being transcribed, and they will be available shortly. Plus, the presentations that were made to the FDA are being submitted for publication right now. And so those will be the reference points for the use of MRD testing within upcoming trials. So one thing that's important for this project, and I would propose that it's also important for other projects like trying to have access for drugs for patients all around the world, is that the access for patients needs to be mediated by having a team committed to work on the project. And so in this case, there was a strong committed team that you see here, the executive team, which include myself, Nikhil Munshi and Jesus San Miguel, clinician researchers very much involved with MRD testing. Bruno Paiva from Pamplona now, who is obviously an expert on methods of MRD testing, and the statistician Chen Shi from the Mayo Clinic, who is a top expert in the area of surrogacy analysis in the use of assessment of an endpoint as a surrogate for PFS. Dr. Anderson was there for our FDA presentations and very, very helpful because of his long-standing relationships with the FDA. So to make this happen, you also need to have a team that is brought together that is focused on this. And this is true for any of these projects. If we want to succeed in getting access for drugs, we need to put together a team that would be specialized in this. In this case, we put together a team that's very familiar with how the FDA works, and what information should be presented, what information should not be presented, and to be aware of how the system works. As part of the system, there is what I have there, OPH, which is the open public hearing. And so this means that for 1.5 hours, patients and other advocates can present to give their opinion about whether MRD is a good idea or not. And so this is actually very important, and fortunately, and I think correctly, that quite a number of patients, they can volunteer to present. They send in their name and what they're going to talk about. And so a number of patients did present to indicate, number one, that MRD testing was important in their case, and also that they supported the idea of MRD testing within trials to accelerate drug approvals. Just that it's a very detailed process for sure. But how did this happen, and what are the implications for all of us, for the patients, pharma companies, and the global myeloma community? And so to give you the historical perspective, this was a result of over 10 years of work. We first started talking about this 10 years ago and had multiple meetings with the FDA over that time span. And about 1.5 years ago, we ultimately had an SAP and a statistical analysis plan in place. And then we had to submit the individual level patient data on over 12,000 patients to the FDA. These came from approximately 20 trials. And so the collaboration that allowed this to move forward was between a number of academic sites that had conducted trials incorporating MRD testing, and you see them there. A number of the European trials, EMN, HOVON, IFM, PETHEMA that we heard about last night, contributed trials. So we had results data from those trials, and in addition, our pharma partners kindly submitted the data from their trials, and 6 of these companies, and as you are aware, several had very, very detailed MRD data within those trials, which was extremely helpful. And so the educational process that was necessary for patients to be supportive and to understand, but also for the FDA and for the ODAC in particular, was to clarify for everyone that the depth of the response does matter. It is confusing to the casual observer that right now we have been using complete remission as an endpoint, and so that seems like it should be pretty good. However, this is very misleading, and that the deeper the response, obviously, the better. And right now, the 10 to the -5 is basically a minimal cutoff, and I think that as trials are moving forward, we may insist and need to move to 10 to the -6, even higher levels of sensitivity to discriminate between some of these very, very effective therapies that we're currently looking at. But the bottom line for the data that were submitted and analyzed from these over 12,000 patients, you saw maybe once or twice already within this meeting, they supported the value and the impact of MRD testing in the newly diagnosed transplant eligible patients, newly diagnosed transplant ineligible, and the relapse refractory patient population. And so I would say that the most active discussion with the ODAC and with the FDA related to the relapse refractory setting, because we actually have a more limited data in that setting, and we have more limited data with the new immune therapies, which will actually be part of the upcoming trials. And so it was a perfectly legitimate question to say, okay, MRD is working in some of these other trials, but will it work in the same fashion, and should it be approved for use in these trials with CAR-T, with bispecifics and combinations and the like? And so, quite frankly, it was a very favorable discussion that allowed an endorsement of use in these upcoming trials. And so the bottom line of the recommendation is that, and the recommendation that came from the FDA is in the dark blue at the bottom. A couple of important points there. The MRD negative is in patients who have achieved CR. And this related in part to the strength of the statistics, in that you're obviously much more likely to have an MRD negative test result in patients who are in CR, and so the amount of missing data was less. And so it made for stronger statistics. And so, but it ends up in having a composite endpoint, which is MRD negative CR with a 10 to the minus 5 threshold. For this latest submission and for analysis, we actually excluded patients with MRD at 10 to the minus 4 because the correlations were much poorer. And so this limited the data sets. But the strength of the data for 10 to the minus 5 at both 9 and 12 months was actually very, very strong for all three disease settings. The FDA did their own analysis of the data, and what was amazing and helpful for us was that they fully agreed with the statistics, which was great. And in fact, one of the big questions is, well, what about 9 months? What about 12 months? What is the best time for testing? And they concluded that if you take patients who are in CR, 9 months is good, 12 months is good. Actually, they are quite open to discussion of what is the appropriate time point for an individual trial. An earlier time point might be more appropriate for a relapse protocol with CAR-T or bispecifics. A longer time point might be more appropriate for a frontline trial. And so where are we now? Well, in 2024, we now have had the acceptance of MRD to be used as an accelerated endpoint within trials. And the FDA did give some examples at the meeting of the trials that they are going to be willing to approve, and I'll show you those just in a moment in closing. But they also indicated the FDA is responsible for, as we heard from Sonia, the quality of life of patients. They're not just interested in improving the overall survival, but it must be accompanied by a reduction in toxicity and appropriate quality of life. And so they're actually quite motivated to move from bone marrow testing of MRD to blood approaches. And so we've actually been invited to look at and assess MRD testing in the blood, and we are looking at that as a next step, as well as what will be the global rollout of MRD. So the advantages of MRD at the patient level, obviously very important. There will be readouts of new therapies and new combinations, 9, 12 months versus now 5 years and much longer, as we're seeing in these trials presented by Peter and Sonia. And this will be leading to timely approval of life-saving therapies. And obviously this is a major positive impact for patients. And so the trials that the FDA offered as examples of what they would be approving are indicated here. Relapse refractory setting, accelerated approval using MRD. In a randomized setting, combined with PFS and overall survival, there could be regular approval. And then in a single trial model, there could be accelerated approval. If the study is powered for PFS and overall survival, that couldn't be followed by regular approval. And so the follow-up steps are to see trial by trial, the MRD carefully integrated into upcoming trials, and maybe even added, if it's still possible, into some recently started trials, if it's possible to do that, to incorporate it into some trials. And I know that some companies are interested to try to do that. Looking at new testing scenarios where blood and other testings would be validated versus bone marrow testing. And following up with the EMA, we have previously submitted these data to the EMA, and now with the ODAC vote, we will be able to follow up and provide the additional information that's necessary for EMA to look toward approval, and obviously looking towards trials incorporating MRD on a global basis. So thank you for your attention.